case anyone's been living under a bridge for the last 15 or 20 years, you may have heard some talk about a health care cost crisis. In fact, it seems like every politician thinks they know a solution to the current healthcare cost crisis. Well, guess what? Over the last hour, you've just seen the solution right there. Can you imagine if only 20% of the American population adhere to just part of what Dr. Sabatino is advocating? Just part. Well, we'd probably reduce healthcare costs enough so it would no longer be a crisis. And then those 80% looking at those 20%, realizing, wow, they don't get sick. We would gradually see the percent of people living healthy and not needing as much expensive health care diminish to the point we would not have this as a major issue. Now, what I'm going to talk about now is an adjunct to what Dr. Sabatino does at his clinic, where he'll do long 21-day water fast, 7-day water fast, intermittent fasting. This is an adjunct to what he is already doing. And this was published, great news, in the New England Journal of Medicine 2 months ago. And for those who don't know all about me, I was told around the age of 11 or 12 that I was supposed to die. And I said, no way. I'm going to figure out a way around it. And that motivated me to read newspaper articles about what's good for you, what's bad for you. And then I started reading medical journals. I've read thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed, published scientific studies. But this particular article, and we're going to give you a link to it, by the way, is probably the most significant scientific study I have ever read as it relates to practical implementations you can make today that will dramatically reduce your risk of degenerative illness and extend your healthy lifespan. We're talking about intermittent fasting. 2 ways to do it. You can go 14 to 20 hours most days without eating, and then for those 6 to 8 hours you are eating, that's the time for you to put the calories in your body. Or you can do 2 days a week of fasting, and then 5 days a week of trying to eat healthy. And the evidence that substantiates the benefits of adding time in between your eating is so substantial that it could literally eliminate 80, 90% of the drugs that are being prescribed out there. Because doctors come in, or you come in there with high blood pressure, cholesterol, triglyceride issues. Doctors, of course, prescribe drugs. But the medical community was enlightened 2 months ago that you could avoid virtually all of those medications simply by extending the period of time between when you eat. And what I do is I'll finish my last meal at, let's say, 2 or 3 a.m. Not the best time to eat, but that's when I do my eating. And then I won't eat again until maybe 9 o'clock the next day. So I'll go anywhere between 14 and 20 hours most days without eating anything. And I'll tell you what, after a while you start feeling really good. And then you condense the time you eat into a 6 to 8 hour period. And what the study showed, and this is a 10-page report, we're going to give you a direct link to it, by the way, so that you can go home and read these 10 incredible pages, that if you can fast for between 16 and 20 hours most days, you're going to live longer and you're going to dramatically decrease your risk of cancer and virtually every other degenerative illness. This is so well substantiated in so many published studies. When they do it in animal models, and the early calorie restriction studies that Dr. Sabatino was talking about, what was interesting is, well, they underfed these animals. But what the animals did is when they gained access to food, they ate it all right away. So they were essentially intermittently fasting in addition to eating a lower calorie diet. And in response to that, all of these benefits occurred in the animal model in response to both intermittent fasting and the calorie restriction going on. Now, in humans, because they've done human studies on this, when you extend the period of time in the day in which you do not consume calories, because again, as Dr. Sabatino was talking about, we weren't meant to eat 3 large meals every single day and snack in between those 3 large meals every single day. That's not what we were meant to do. And that's what we're doing today because food is abundant. It's gotten cheap. At least the garbage food is very inexpensive. So people are eating it and they're encountering a whole lot of problems. But if you engage in intermittent fasting, you can probably cheat a little bit if you want to and still derive these kinds of benefits, systemic benefits for your overall health. And the evidence is so consistent that medical doctors who bothered to read that report in their own journal, December 26, 2019, New England Journal of Medicine, that in response to intermittent fasting, you get a systemic improvement in overall health. And as was discussed earlier, the mechanistic target of rapamycin, mTOR, and that stands now, that acronym, for two different explanations. It was originally the mammalian target of rapamycin, and nowadays more and more scientists are referring to it as the mechanistic target of rapamycin. But if you undergo intermittent fasting, this is between 14 and 20 hours most days, whatever you're comfortable with, you stimulate that autophagy. That's the cleansing of the accumulated metabolic waste products inside your cells. You are going to cleanse your cells by intermittent fasting, by inhibiting mTOR. You're going to promote autophagy, remove the cellular junk, and improve cellular functionality. And the most impressive study, and there are hundreds of them out there, you understand, the most impressive one was that when young rats were put on an intermittent fasting diet, well, their lifespan increased by 80%. Now the average of these kind of studies is about 50%, but this particular one showed an increase of about 80%. That is absolutely incredible. And humans, when they intermittently fast, you look at what's plaguing modern man, the obesity, dyslipidemia, hypertension, inflammation, insulin resistance, all of that goes away when you elongate the period of time, most days, where you're not ingesting calories. And one study found that fasting insulin, which is something you don't want too much of, decreased 57% in response to intermittent fasting. And to put into context how important I feel reducing fasting insulin is, starting around the year 2000, our group, one of our groups, we invested over $4 million trying to isolate a compound that we knew that worked. We just weren't able to make it. And the beneficial mechanism of that compound was to reduce fasting insulin. The compound never was developed. I don't know if it ever will be developed, but you don't even have to worry about that. If you engage in intermittent fasting, you can reduce your fasting insulin by about 57%, and that is incredibly beneficial. Now bear in mind, this entire PowerPoint presentation will be on the website of this group, so you can look at this particular PowerPoint slide and realize that every single metabolic disorder that is afflicting modern man has to do with the fact is we're putting way too many calories in our body and doing that in a consistent manner. We don't miss meals. We just don't do it. If we're running late for something, we'll stop at a fast food place and eat on the way to the next appointment. Even though we may already have had a big breakfast, a lunch, and we're thinking, need to put more food in my body. Well, you don't need to do it, and it is killing you. So when you look at this on your own, by the way, you'll see just how toxic all of this is. So what we did is we took the New England Journal of Medicine, we found a direct link to this article on the benefits of intermittent fasting. It's about 10 pages long. I encourage every single one of you to go home and just log on to the website and read this article. It might take you 40 minutes, but it's going to open your eyes to the volume of scientific data substantiating the health and longevity benefits of intermittent fasting, calorie reduction, healthy eating patterns. It's going to substantiate that in a way you may very well change how you perform your dietary patterns. And this is the article, by the way. It's a review article, basically. These scientists, they looked at all the published literature and they put it all together in a way that got published in a prestigious medical journal. It didn't get recognized in the media the way it should have, but then again, December 26th, busy time of the year, people thinking about a lot of things, including over-ingesting calories. Now, I've put this slide up a couple times in the past, and it talks about an incredible breakthrough in technology starting in 1980 compared to 2014, a 50% decrease in deaths from heart disease. This is a result of improved medical technology and the fact that people are smoking less and some people are watching their diet a little bit better. This is a really major, major advance, but there's a problem that I'm going to tell you about in just a minute. These, again, are the reasons. We're eating healthier. When I say we, the health-conscious people, which are a growing number, we're avoiding foods that we know cause cardiac disease, and there are improved emergency responses. If one of us were to have a heart attack right now, if one of us were to have that happen, well, we could have an ambulance here really quick. We could go to a cath lab at Memorial Hospital, and they could put a stent or do a bypass procedure and literally save our lives. These are the reasons for this huge decline. And if you look at the timeline and the history of cardiac deaths, you can think about people like President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Lyndon Johnson. They did not have access to bypass surgery, to stenting, and they suffered from congestive heart failure for decades until they died of it. But you go from 1876, when it was first discovered that coronary artery blockage is what was causing most heart attacks. It's really remarkable to think that before 1876, they didn't know why people were having heart attacks. And they were having them back then, by the way. But so many people died of infectious diseases that not a whole lot of them lived long enough to suffer heart disease. But from 1876 to 2014, technology kept getting better. And then something happened. Heart attack deaths are surging higher. 2019, the data started to show we're going in reverse. And what is the cause of that? Mainly obesity and metabolic disorders such as type 2 diabetes. And how do we prevent that problem from killing us? Well, I think most of us in this room are doing what we can do, but we can also engage in those healthy eating patterns that you just heard about and the intermittent fasting. Do that. You don't have to be a victim of what's going on right now. And this is occurring in people under age 65. They're starting to have heart attacks again like they were in the 1950s, 1960s when it was at epidemic proportions. So this New England Journal of Medicine article, you can read the entire 10-page article on the website. It may very well change your view as to how often you eat. You might decide, you know what, I can skip a couple meals out of the day and I'm going to be healthier, I'm going to feel better, and it's going to enable me to live long enough to achieve what this organization was set up to do. And that is immortality. And that's the name of a book that came out January 7th, 2020. Immortality, Inc. And this reporter, who's going to be speaking here next month, March 26th, he'll be speaking right here. This book contained interviews of the people in Silicon Valley who are spending lots and lots of money to figure a way for them to live for an indefinite period of time. And if they succeed, it means we're all eventually going to get to live for an indefinite period of time. We're talking about finding a way to cure the aging process and its affiliated associated disorders. This is huge. This book is getting a lot of publicity, and a lot of people who never even considered the concept of reading about how long people can potentially live, they're now realizing some of the more intelligent, forward-thinking human beings who have ever existed are spending lots and lots of money on technologies to enable them to find a cure for biological aging, all of its diseases, and the death process itself. So that author will be on this podium on March 26th, and I hope most of you will be able to attend, because I can't wait to hear the inside stories that he's going to relate about some of the most famous multi-billionaires in the world, what they're doing to accomplish what this organization was set up to do. So Chip Walter will be here next month, and he'll be talking about what people are doing who have the kind of resources to engage scientists in meaningful research projects, what they're doing. But if we're going to make it into that era where people will have abundant life, essentially eternal life on earth, got to take care of ourselves today. Because these breakthroughs, well, they're not going to happen next year or 2 or 3 years from now. Probably going to take 5 or 10 years. Need to take care of ourselves today. And that's where the intermittent fasting and the ultra-healthy dietary patterns that you just heard expound. You heard what to do. A lot of you already know it, by the way, but I hope these kind of talks will motivate you. So I think this has been a record turnout. I don't think we've ever had so many people here on a Thursday night event. We had a Sunday afternoon event one time where we couldn't even fit people in, but nonetheless, this has been a spectacular event. So I'll be around as usual for people who want to ask me questions about intermittent fasting or anything else that relates to health and longevity. And let's go downstairs and have a nice meal.